Curriculum development based on education methods. My name is David Ewen. Curriculum developers understand better how to create lesson programs when they know teaching methods. Those methods require curriculum to be developed in such a way to support teachers with their instruction. A hand-in-hand relationship between teaching methodology and curriculum development results in lesson slides that flow in a way that fits student needs. By understanding teaching methodology curriculum, developers can make effective course designs that are appreciated by both teachers and students. The foundation of successful teaching is the result of the good work curriculum developers do. It comes from their knowledge of what the teacher does and what the student expects. Teaching techniques. The different teaching techniques shown here in this presentation parallels Bloom's taxonomy, which is the taxonomy of educational objectives. It begins with the least sophisticated level of processing, that being the recall of knowledge and facts, and progresses to the highest level, thinking, that involves evaluative processes. Here are the educational objectives for learning. Number 1, knowledge. That involves being able to label, list, match, recall, select, state, and underline. Number 2 is comprehension. This involves being able to describe, explain, interpret, summarize, and paraphrase. The third one is application. This has the ability to complete, organize, solve, calculate, compute, and apply. Number 4 is analysis. This is the ability to categorize, classify, find patterns and relationships, compare and contrast. Number 5 is synthesis. This is the ability to compose, create, formulate, hypothesize, and write. And number 6, evaluation. This is the ability to judge based on criteria, to support and conclude. These are the educational objectives for learning. Direct instruction. With direct instruction, the teacher decides what is important for the students to know and specifically explain or demonstrate a skill, and the student attempts to replicate it. As children struggle to reproduce the letters of the alphabet, they need all the concentration and control they can muster. Similarly, the high school student performing the steps of an experiment can be very focused and intent. Nonetheless, the demands for deep understanding and recombining of information on the part of the student are minimal in a direct instruction format. The emphasis is clearly on the acquiring of information or procedural skills. Drill and practice. One level up from direct instruction is drill and practice. Though it might seem that this technique is even more rote in nature than direct instruction, the implication is that something has already been learned or at the very least been presented, and now the emphasis is on repetition to hone the skill or provide a strong link to the information to improve remembering it. With this particular technique, there is not a great emphasis on abstraction or on the synthesis of new understanding. Your own experience with multiplication tables would be an example of drill and practice. There was not much mathematical theory being taught when you were required to memorize those products. Lecture. The mainstay of traditional college education, the lecture, shows up third in our instructional technique hierarchy. What does that tell you about the thinking that lectures requires of a student? We are by no means denigrating the lecture approach. But the simple fact is that lectures in their pure form serve only to offer information from one person to another in a one-way verbal transaction. It needs to be mentioned that many times teachers will follow up a lecture with some sort of discussion session. However, lectures can be and often are presented without any opportunity for an intellectual exchange between student and teacher. Its strength is that a large amount of information can be conveyed to a large group of people in a short amount of time with a concomitant personal touch. At this point, we begin considering techniques that actually require reflection on the part of the student, and thus involve evaluation and the synthesis of new information. Reflection requires that the student receive information and then consider it with regard to his or her own experiences and interpretations. The question and answer technique supposes that to one degree or another, the teacher and the student share a common body of knowledge. This does not mean that the student has the same depth of knowledge or understanding, but there are sufficient elements to the common core that allow the student and the teacher to make consideration of the topic a two-way exchange. A step higher in our taxonomy of instructional techniques is discussion. This differs from the previous level in that neither the teacher nor the student holds the upper hand. In this situation, the teacher is concerned with the very different treatment of information than possible using the previous methods. Discussions involve the exchange of ideas. With this approach, a teacher hopes to develop greater depth of thinking and perhaps to foster the manipulation of information for solving problems rather than just the acquisition of knowledge. Some might argue that discussion is not the most appropriate term for what teachers wish to accomplish. In fact, discussion does refer more to the arguing of points of view, whereas dialogue refers to an exchange of ideas. In either case, the instructional intent is to take students beyond just the facts and to engage them in a more poignant treatment of the subject matter. Mental modeling. Mental modeling is specifically intended to enhance students' ability to direct their own learning by modeling the use of cognitive processes in the solving of some problem. A teacher demonstrates how to sequence steps and put information to work in solving a problem. The students are exposed to the steps of listing observations, formulating a question, and identifying possible sources of information. Here are mental modeling examples. Number 1. I'd like to find my way to Sarah's house. I know the address, but I don't know how to get there from the school. I think I'll use the map of our city to find the way there. First, I'll check the street index to find out where to look on the map. Then I'll use the numbers from the index to find the street. Number 2. This morning I looked outside and noticed that it wasn't very sunny. I observed lots of gray clouds. I wondered if it was going to rain today. I could have just carried an umbrella in case it did rain and not thought about it anymore. However, I was planning to wear my new shoes and I really didn't want to get them wet and dirty the first time I wore them. So I checked the newspaper and the Weather Channel. Discovery learning. Discovery learning is an approach to instruction that focuses on students' personal experiences as the foundation for conceptual development. This is allowing students to find the information for themselves by virtue of some activity you have provided. Student and teacher share a common experience that you can develop as it relates to the concept under consideration. In essence, we are cheating just a bit because from an instructional perspective, the idea is to have children discover what we want them to discover. It's a new part to them, of course, but it is all part of the strategy for the teacher. Here is the 4-phase learning cycle. Number 1, instruction. A question, challenge, or interesting event that captures the student's curiosity. Number 2, exploration. The opportunity for students to manipulate materials, to explore, and to gather information. Number 3, concept development. With a common experience to relate to, terminology is introduced and concepts developed in class discussion. Application. This could take the form of an enrichment activity, an opportunity to apply what has been learned, or a test to assess learning. So again, the 4-phase learning cycle includes number 1, an introduction, number 2, exploration, number 3, concept development, and number 4, application. Inquiry. Students with their natural curiosity are compelled to ask questions and take delight in finding answers. The task for professional educators is to channel that inquisitiveness in ways that are beneficial to the individual and perhaps even to the world at large. Suddenly, our discussion has come a very long way from rudimentary direct instruction. Students can read, write, calculate, and engage in curriculum content, all in the context of answering their own questions. We will talk about the taxonomy of instructional techniques. Instructional techniques. Number one, teacher-focused instructional techniques. Number two, dialogue-oriented instructional techniques. Number three, student-focused instructional techniques. Let's start with teacher-focused instructional techniques. Direct instruction. Direct instruction is when the teacher explains or demonstrates. The next one is drill and practice. Drill and practice is the repetition to hone a skill or memorize information. The final and last one is lecture. Lecture is when the teacher provides information to students in a one-way verbal presentation. So again, the teacher-focused instructional techniques involve direct instruction, drill and practice, and lecture. Dialogue-oriented instructional techniques. Number one, question and answer. This requires a reflection as information is exchanged in response to a question. Number two, discussion. An exchange of opinions and perspectives. So again, dialogue-oriented instructional techniques involve number one, question and answer, and number two, discussion. Student-focused instructional techniques. The first one is mental modeling. Mental modeling assists students in managing their own learning by modeling a problem-solving technique. The next one is discovery learning. Discovery learning uses students' personal experiences as the foundation for building concepts. And finally, inquiry. Inquiry allows students to generate the questions that they will then investigate and answer. So these are the instructional techniques. Number one, teacher-focused instructional techniques. Number two, dialogue-oriented instructional techniques. And number three, student-focused instructional techniques. Thank you.